Welcome to the Blind Apex Podcast, where amateur club racers tune in to get faster.
And on this episode, my superstitious self is coming out. We're going to talk about wet weather, because I can't say the R word. I just can't bring myself to do it. I'm sure Hunter, some of the Spec 3 guys, they're all screaming it right now because they love to chant it. I just can't bring myself to say it. But we're going to talk about wet weather. Now, in my 4 or 5 years of racing, I've only had to do it 2.5-ish times. Twice I put on specific tires, and once I was out on slicks. And I don't have a lot of opinion on the matter. But joining me is somebody who's been an idol to me, informed me a lot. He is a race coach, a racer, the man behind all of the speed secrets, Mr. Ross Bentley. Welcome to the show.
Rain. I had to say it.
That's fine. Yeah.
I put it out
Yeah,
there.
put
Okay.
it out in the world. It's okay.
Yeah.
I won't put it out there. You can do it all you want.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on and allowing me to talk about something that I enjoy. I actually love driving in the
You
rain.
have a handful, maybe half a dozen articles on the topic of racing in inclement weather. And you have 3 videos on YouTube. One that has really, really struck me on the how to approach it mentally when you're on track. So if anybody, you just search Ross Bentley racing in the R word, and it'll come up for you. It definitely was a eye opener for me. So,
Yeah, I think you're talking about that video from when I drove in a race at COTA
yes.
a number of years ago. And it was one of those, I think it was one of those, it was an endurance race, a World Racing League WRL race at COTA. And the guys that I were driving with, the plan was not for me to start the race. But we got there on the track that morning and it was pouring rain, and they all kind of looked at me and said, "You start." And I just went, whoopee, yippee, I get to do this. And I had an absolute blast. Now, I will say that I did have later in that stint, the water splashed up in the wrong place on the header. All of a sudden, the windshield completely fogged over, and I had to crawl back to the pits looking at the painted line, the fog line on the side of the track to find my way back to the pits. So there was some good, and there was a little bit of bad there, but cleaned the windshield and got back out. So yeah, I love driving in the rain.
It's a interesting topic. I do want to get to the car prep side of life. I am very opinionated on that matter. I shorted out an ECU in one of my 2.5-ish drives in the inclement weather. And so I have lots of opinions on that part. But you in that video talked yourself through. I mean, it wasn't live. I'm assuming you dubbed it over afterwards, but you talked yourself through how to approach things. So what kind of mindset do you go in when the sky starts crying and the inclement weather comes out?
I think the very first part is just embracing it and simply going, hey, it's just water. I don't know about you, but most days I start my day by having a shower. And I'm in the shower, and I don't want to go too deep
Right.
into what I do in the shower, but I think about driving in the rain. And so I relate driving in the rain to, it feels good being in a shower. And it puts me into a good mindset. And I think that's the very first thing that, a lot of drivers, they start by saying, I hate it. I hate it. And what do you do well that
Nothing.
you hate doing? So, and sometimes you have to fake it till you make it. Even if you hate it, tell yourself that you love it. And then start thinking about what is it that you could love about it? And so I think that's the first part of it. And that's, what I tried to, I guess part of what I tried to get across in that video was nothing scary, bad is going to happen. And, so that was the first part. And then, I tried, yes, I dubbed it over afterwards. I replayed it and just talked over what was going through my mind during those laps. And, some of it was rather than focusing on, oh my God, it's raining, it's slippery, I could slide off and crash. My mindset was, I'm going to go past the next car. I'm going to pass the next car. How am I going to do that? I'm going to set my car up here. I'm going to get the car in the right position. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. So I was focused on what I was going to do, and rather than what I didn't like. So I think that was really what I was trying to get across in the video. And yeah, there's some technique part of it, but most of it was around just that mindset of, what do I have? And it's something that sort of come to me more recently when people say, what do I do about driving in the rain? And one of the things that I've told drivers to look for is focus on the grip that you have rather than the grip you don't have. And I know that sounds kind of like, well, what's the difference kind of thing, but it's very different. I mean, one of the techniques that everybody shares about driving in the rain is, go and drive the grippier part of the track where the track has more grip. Well, and that's really what it is. It's focus on where the track has grip, focus on where the car has grip. And yeah, it may not have the same level of grip as the dry, and won't, but there are places on the track where there is more grip than where there isn't grip. So focus on where there's grip, focus on what you can do rather than what you can't do. And I think that's what I really tried to get across in that video was that part of it.
Part of the attitude you need to have when you're in the paddock till you turn the key, you roll off grid, you take the green flag. You really have to have that attitude.
I've told this story a couple times or a few times. Years ago, I was driving in an IMSA race at Watkins Glen. And shortly before qualifying, it just started major downpour, like just pouring down rain. And, all the teams are, they've got their transporters out and the big awnings out the side, or the teams are based in the garages at Watkins Glen. And I'm kind of standing there and I look down and I can see many of my competitors kind of standing either in the garage or underneath the awnings from their transporter. And they're kind of looking out up at the sky, and kind of, you can almost see them thinking, I sure hope this clears up before qualifying. So what I do is I go walking up and down in front of them. I just start going for a walk around the paddock in the pouring rain. I'm getting drenched, but I'm thinking this is no different than having the shower I had this morning. And I'm walking around in the pouring rain. And I think the other drivers looked at me like, man, that guy is crazy. And I'm thinking, this is great. They think I'm crazy. They think that I love driving in the rain. And I can sort of, I can be honest about it now. Would I have preferred to be dry, have a dry qualifying session? Yeah, I would have. But I decided to embrace it. And so I just walked around in the pouring rain and got totally drenched, and then came back, got changed, and got in the car and went out and qualified and got the pole. And it's like, how much of that was my skill and how much of that was my mindset? I don't know the answer to that question, but I'm pretty sure my mindset had a big part of it.
And a big part of your mindset, I feel, is you've not shied away from the opportunity to participate in any track day with inclement weather, right? You don't have the attitude. I've heard you on your podcast. You don't go, oh, I'm going to bag it early because of, situationally, sure, but not because of the weather. You're not going to bag it. You're going to go out. You need that experience. I think the more seat time you have doing it, the more your attitude can easily adjust to it, the more your mindset is correct for it. You know what to anticipate. And I think a lot of people shy away from it. So,
yeah, you nailed it there. And some people say, yeah, that's, you come from the Pacific Northwest where it rains a lot. Yeah, okay, it rains more than some other places. And yeah, I guess maybe that was an advantage. I didn't grow up in Arizona or something like that where it never rains. So I had more time to practice, but really, it was that attitude of when it started to rain, I was always the first car on track because I wanted to get more practice than everybody else. And I think that's important too. I mean, I'm at tracks every weekend and it starts to rain and I see a driver go, I'm not going out in the session. It's raining. Why not? There's not a better time to learn more about the technique, the controls, the everything. That also apply
Absolutely.
to driving in the dry as well. So it's a huge learning opportunity that some drivers pass up on. It's unfortunate.
The more time you get racing, driving in the weather, the more opportunity you have to really sharpen your skills with car control. And those car control, those feelings you have, no matter if it's wet out or dry, those feelings that you have, you know how to react to them. And you get more practice that way. We're not always slipping everywhere in the dry. In the wet, it's much easier to do. So you have a lot more practice. And generally, you're turning the speed down a little bit. And so it's actually a lot easier to handle. And there's less consequence. When you turn it, if you're trying to go down the front straightaway and hit your brake marker, like it's still dry out, the consequences are high. But if you're taking things measured, especially if you're just practicing HPDE, maybe not a race practice day, but if you're still in HPDE, take that time to learn.
Yeah, actually, and you bring up a good point of, you're coming down the front straightaway, you're approaching the first corner, there's a big brake zone, let's say, and do you start off by braking a little bit earlier? Yes, you do. But what you might find is you end up braking almost at the same place. And the reason is, because you're not traveling as fast. You probably didn't get out of the previous corner as fast. Your top speed down the straightaway is lower. So where you begin braking often is, it's very close to where it is in the dry. And, those are some of the little technique things that you only learn through experience or somebody come along and saying, hey, do this. And so you said that you've done 2.5. Were they races in the rain or were they practice sessions or?
I spent my entire HPDE career in the dry. I couldn't find a wet weather weekend anywhere on the East Coast for me. And so my first one was nerve-wracking, but I drive a front wheel drive car. And so I knew there were some advantages to it. You definitely can focus on exit out. More power can come down that way. And I run an adjustable sway bar. I think we'll get into maybe how we can adjust the car, but I softened everything, and then went out. I actually made a mistake, and I'll admit to it later, but the first time out, while it was wet, there was spray coming into my car. It was going everywhere, in through the windows, the firewall, all that. And so this sort of transition into how we can prep the car. But after that race and shorting out at ECU, I made it my goal to seal up the floor and the firewall, not to have not one open millimeter of hole, because, well, it cost me almost $1,000 at the time, but it was invaluable time, and I missed out on it. About halfway through the race, it shorted out and I was done. So, and I was enjoying myself. I also strategically started in the back because it was a mixed class race, and I purposely started from pit lane so I could miss turn one, and turn one was a little messy. So, and by a little messy, I think we passed 30 cars going into turn one, just because they all went off in some way or another. So,
right. And you bring up the point of sealing up the firewall and stuff like that. Oh, and by the way, that makes the car safer. If the car ever has a fire and it's in the engine compartment, sealing up the firewall could make the difference of fire getting through to you. So there's that side benefit, or I don't even want to call it a side benefit. That maybe is the main benefit. But which track was this at? Curious.
It was at Virginia International Raceway.
Oh, okay. So, the thing about VIR is, there is that dry line or there's a wet line. There's, it tends, some tracks have a very dramatic rain line versus dry line. Some tracks, it doesn't change a whole lot. And a lot of times it comes down to the surface. If you go and walk a track, or you look at the pavement and there's, if the pavement is very porous, there's lots of little divots in between the stones in the asphalt and things. That's places where the water can go. And but if you're on a newly resurfaced track, I was just at Road America recently, and we're looking at the pavement they put down just recently in the pave that got the repaving they did end of last year, I guess it was. And I would not want, I would either not want to, or I would want to be in the rain right now on that track, because I believe it's going to be quite slippery. And the reason is that it's almost like there's a sealer down on the top of the pavement. It's so smooth, and there's not much, pores in between the stones and stuff for the water to go to. And obviously, as more and more cars drive on that dry line, that fills up those little pores in the pavement with rubber, and that becomes the slipperiest part of the track. So that's why we drive offline many times in the rain. VIR has got some parts of the track where the goal is to drive off of the dry line. The challenge with VIR is, going up through the S's, you cannot avoid all of the dry line. There are places on that track where you just cannot avoid it. So you kind of go from, I got some grip, I don't have much grip, I got a little bit more grip, and it's changing all the time. And Mid-Ohio is the extreme example of that right now, where they've got little concrete patch, and then there's some regular pavement, and there's some sealed pavement, and you're constantly searching for that grip, and it's constantly changing. You go from, there are places at Mid-Ohio, for example, at the end of the straightaway, as you come into turn 4 of the pro course, at the end of the long back straightaway, and you turn into that right hander, you kind of drive across the sealer, and it's like, I'm just going to slide across, and when I get to the other side, the car's going to get some grip, and then it's going to turn. So you anticipate that I've got practically no grip there. You slide across, you get some grip, and then the car turns. And that to me is super fun, because it's not doing the same thing. I'm not going to say that driving in the dry is boring, but it's really kind of the same. You drive very close to the same line all the time. Whereas in the rain, that line changes from, is it pouring rain? Is it a little bit of rain? Is it drying out? Is it getting wetter? It's constantly changing. So you constantly are searching and trying different lines. So maybe it's my, I tell people all the time that I get bored doing the same thing over and over again. I'm just kind of one of those people. Maybe it's a little ADHD. I don't know what it is, but that's me. And so that's one of the reasons why I love driving in the rain, is because it's constantly different. That's the challenge.
The dynamics definitely change. They will change as the weather increases or as it tapers off. The track, like you said, all the tracks react differently. I find myself just trying to avoid the painted curbs at VIR when it's wet.
Yeah.
But I've only been there twice when it's been that way. So I couldn't tell you one way or the other, whether it's really working or not. But I know they're much more slippery, say, than exiting turn 10 at Summit Point in the wet. It was a little different. There's more grip. There's like more sand in their paint or something. So,
yeah. A few years ago, I was at Red Bull Ring in Austria. I was coaching drivers there, and it was raining. And there, the goal is get to the curbs as fast as you can, because they put like a sand kind of thing into the paint, and it's almost like drive for the curbs and get there as soon as you can, and then do all your turning when you get there. So in most tracks, it's not. It's like stay off the paint, stay off the paint. So,
right.
And that's one of those things where walking the track beforehand, we walked it, and as we're walking it, we're scuffing our foot along and going, wow, this is probably going to have really good grip in the rain. And I think it was the second session or something like that, it started raining, and the drivers I was working with, they immediately just went, go to the curb, just go drive the curb. So one of the other many reasons for going and doing a track walk.
Oh, absolutely. It increases your overall awareness. It provides that awareness before you get out there. Well, maybe I need to try out here. It could be the first place you go to because you've done the track walk. You've been out there. You've seen what the pavement looks like. The elevation. Whether it's cupping out there or whether it's going off camber or anything like that. And it can be really beneficial. There's video after video on it, but I really implore people to check out your virtual track walks because they've been beneficial to me in the past, especially the VIR one. But yeah, it makes you aware.
Yeah, it helps that I partner up with Peter Krause and those things. Peter practically lives at VIR, so that's a good one. So, so was your second race in the rain? Was it at VIR as well?
It was, and I actually started with the main pack at that point.
Okay, so I'm curious, what were the big sort of I'm starting to get an idea or feel for this. What improved from the first one to the second one, other than the ECU not shorting out?
Oh, I actually had an ignition problem at that one because the ignition setup got wet. So, both of those times have been terrible. But the aha moments for me, like you said earlier, is I wasn't quite coming out of hog pen like you can do it in the dry. You can't load up in hog pen the same way when there's a river coming across the bottom. So
right.
That pushed my brake marker because we were checking up more like an HPDE line, more check up, drive in, straighten out, check up again, and then come in, and just slowing way down to get through that. Yeah. There's a stream that crosses down there in hog pen. So that really impacted my straightaway speed by probably 7 or 8 miles an hour, to be honest. And then my brake marker went basically almost back to where I was. So,
and you bring up a couple of sort of key techniques, I guess, rain driving techniques. One is if there's a stream, a river, a puddle on the track, do whatever you can to have the wheels pointing straight when you go across that. Just there are times where it's almost like there's going to be a stream partway through the corner, and you've got a wheel in it. You're turning the wheel, you're turning the wheel, you're turning the wheel, and then just before you hit that, you straighten the wheel up, drive straight across it, and then once you get to the other side, you turn the wheel again. And again, those are the kind of things that you don't ever think about or having to do in the dry, but it's that extra little challenge of driving in the rain. And so, having the wheels straight as you're going across that to avoid, the hydroplane and spinning sideways kind of a thing. But the other part of that is, or related to that, I guess, really is the line. If given one particular corner, in the dry versus in the rain, you would want to drive what I call squaring the corner off. And by that, I mean going deeper into the corner, turning the car sharper, which means slowing it down more, but then driving it on a straighter line coming out of the corner. And the idea being, for most tires, most cars, you lose more lateral grip, so side-to-side cornering grip, than you do longitudinal grip. So you're, going from the dry being 100% both, let's, for example here, I'm not saying this is the way it is, but let's say your longitudinal grip, your braking and acceleration grip might drop to 80%, whereas your cornering grip might drop to 85%. So the takeaway from that is spend less time cornering and more time driving straight. Okay. And it's almost like turn the track into a series of drag strips and drive it down in a straight, turn the thing, drive it back in a straight, turn it, do that as much as you possibly can. Now, on road courses, we can't do that entirely, but coming out of hog pen, rather than sort of that big, long, gradual release of the steering wheel, you try to drive it down a little deeper, get the car to turn so you can open your hands and get your hand pointing straight a little sooner. Mm-hmm. So in a way, you late apex, you spend more time late apexing than you would in the dry. So those kinds of things of driving with your hands pointing straight more often is always a good thing in the rain.
Okay. You must have my notes in front of you because I wrote it down watching your Coda video. You said he's not squaring up. He's not squaring off the corner and it's hurting him in the weather. And I was like, okay, I want to know what that's about. Okay, that makes sense though.
Yeah. And that's it. I mean, the driver, I can't remember exactly, but the driver that was in front of me, I think they were driving kind of the dry line, which meant a lot of cornering forces. Whereas I just go a little deeper, turn the car, square it off. Again, I call it squared it off because it's more of a, in the perfect world, it's almost like a right angle, and then you turn again. So, I think the best rain drivers do that.
Okay.
And so, yeah, that's one of the techniques that you aim for in the rain, and again, then you got to factor in, well, is that where the track has the most grip? Because sometimes the best thing you could do is just drive all the way around the outside edge of the track, around a corner, because nobody drives out there in the dry. Mm-hmm. And for that reason, the track is not polished smooth. There's never a lot of rubber built up in that porous part of the asphalt. And the track just has way more grip out there. And, it's also referred to kind of as a rim shot. If you watch motocross racers, sometimes they run that big high line around the outside because it's up against the berm or the rim, and the bike just has all this grip around there. And it's the same kind of thing in the rain sometimes. The scary part as a driver is you don't have a whole lot of margin for error there.
Zero.
You could be, and sometimes the very best drivers, the outside tires will be like 6 inches from the edge of the track. And you're like, wow, there's no margin for error. But the grip level is so high there, they don't need as big a margin for error.
Right.
So it's kind of there's a balance there.
So you talked about searching for the grippiest pavement. And I've seen that in several of your articles that you have on racing in the weather. So one of the things that you talk about is initiate slow and react fast. Mm-hmm. So can you explain that philosophy a little bit? Well,
we all know that smooth is fast, right? That's been drilled into every driver's head a billion times. Right. Sometimes maybe even a little bit too far. But the smoother you input, the application and release of the brake pedal and the gas pedal, the smoother you turn the steering wheel, the more time the tires have to build up their grip level. The analogy I always use is, and this applies to the dry and to the rain equally, is, if you take a piece of thread or string and you're holding it on either end with both hands. So you're pulling that apart, and you very slowly pull it apart. It takes a lot of effort to break that string. But if you very quickly go snap, and you snap that, I know that, podcasts, you can't see all this, but the idea is that, if you kind of snap the string, it breaks it much quicker. It's the same thing with the tires. If you come up to a corner and you just really quickly just like whap the steering wheel and like really rotate it quickly, we all know that that's going to break the tires loose sooner. So the idea of initiate slowly is initiate your inputs with the steering wheel, with the brake pedal, with the gas pedal, slowly, smoothly. But a mistake I see a lot of drivers make is, okay, the car's sliding a little bit. I'll catch it. I'll catch it. I'll catch it. I'll catch it. Oh, I didn't catch it. Mm-hmm. So once the car starts to either understeer or oversteer, don't wait then. That's when you got to be quick. You got to have quick hands. So a lot of drivers are so programmed, so trained to be smooth with the inputs that they're not quick enough to catch it. And a lot of times what causes a spin is the car starts to slide and the driver's trying to catch it with smooth, slow hands. And at that point in time, you need quick hands to catch it. Okay. And that's what's gonna keep you on the track.
So that makes sense to me. But you also say in other articles that in the weather, you want to make the car do something and not wait for it. So how do we marry those two principles for racing in the weather?
Okay, so first of all, I'm worried because it sounds like you've read everything that I've written. So, and I'm afraid you're going to come up with something. No. So this was a big lesson for me in my very first season of racing. And I'd raced in a rain one time and kind of got my butt kicked and went, I'm not going to let that happen to me again. So every practice session I would go, when it rained, I would go and drive in the rain all the time. Mm-hmm. And this was one of those things where I kind of mistakenly enter the corner too fast. So I turned into the corner and the car started to understeer. The car started to slide. And like from the moment I turned the steering wheel, from the initial turn in, it started to slide. But as I was getting to that point, I was like, oh, I'm going a little bit too fast. Okay, the car is probably going to slide. So while I was making a mistake and I hadn't intentionally done that at that time, I was a little bit prepared for it because I was kind of like, oh, going a little fast. Okay, I got it. So then I continued to practice that. And I deliberately would enter the corner just a little bit, you would say in some ways too fast, but actually it really is the right speed. But it's fast enough to make the car do something. I found that where I was before was I would come into the corner and I'd turn in and the car would be kind of on rails. Mm-hmm. It would be stuck.
Right.
And I would turn in and then I'd spin part of the corner going, when's it going to slide? When's it going to slide? When's it going to slide? Oh, there it slid. So then I was having to react to it. And because I was reacting to it, it wasn't a smooth reaction. I couldn't initiate slowly. But if I come into a corner and let's say it's a corner that I typically in the dry would trail brake into that corner a little bit to help me rotate the car. In this case, what I might do is I might start releasing the brake pedal just a little bit sooner, smoothly, but just a little earlier, still slowly and smoothly, but a little bit earlier. So I kind of unloaded the front end of the car as I'm coming to the corner, which kept my speed up and it made the car understeer. So now I'm coming to the corner and I'm deliberately making the car understeer. And I come into the corner and it's like, okay, it's understeering. I know it. I deliberately made it understeer. So I'm ready for it. I'm ready. And now I work the throttle and my steering the rest of the way through the corner to have or to keep some of that understeer all the way through the corner. And now the car is not taking me by surprise. Or, I might, depending on the car and the corner and everything else, I might come into the corner and go, I'm going to trail brake a little longer and kind of deliberately make the car just rotate a little bit, oversteer just a tiny little bit on entry, pick up the throttle, and then sort of maintain just a little bit of that oversteer through the rest of the corner. So I've made the car do something so that it doesn't surprise me. And to do that, you have to initiate slowly. Mm-hmm. But if it does something bigger than I wanted, understeered more than I wanted, or oversteered more than I wanted, I'm going to catch it quickly. Like I'm not going to be too slow with my hands at that point, or my throttle or brake. So that's how you marry it. And I got to say that mindset of make the car do something was what turned my driving in the rain. It made all the difference in the world. Took me from a mediocre at best rain driver to a guy that could win races in the rain. So I think that, and then, thinking about that whole idea of focus on the grip that I had and don't get overly concerned about the grip that I don't have, because I'm, again, doing things deliberately. I'm proactive about it rather than reactive.
Yeah. And I think when you can marry making the car do something, but your initiation is slow and smooth, your reaction is quick and fast. Say the corner that's behind you, he has a 180 hairpin behind him. If you come in that way, initiate, get yourself corrected quickly, you have gone to the other thing you've talked about, which was you're squaring the corner off. That corner behind you is impossible to square off if you do not make the car do something.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. You got it. So, and I have a goal here. I'm gonna my goal is by the end of this, you're gonna say the R word, and because the superstition part you mentioned earlier on, it's part of our belief system, right? I mean, really, that's what superstitions are. It's part of our belief system. If we believe that a black cat walks across in front of me, I'm going to have bad luck. Well, if we truly believe that, that's part of our belief system. And if you believe that you are good in the rain, you're going to be better in the rain than you would have been if you were like, I suck in the rain. So,
I don't believe I'm terrible in any of it. I think that I take every opportunity to improve, especially when there's weather out. My superstition is when I was a kid playing baseball, if the R word occurred, we didn't get to play. And so we were never allowed to say it. And it's haunted me ever since. So,
okay. Well,
yeah, I can play.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, what I love about that is the word play. Because that's really what you do when you go in the rain. You're playing. When you think about it, whether we're racing, or HPD, DE track day, whatever, we're just out there to play. It's playtime. So when it rains, you can play.
Absolutely.
Baseball, a different thing. Now, if you're an oval track racer or a drag racer, different deal. But us road course types, we play in the rain.
Yeah, we do.
I sometimes picture us. When you see a little 3 or 5 year old kid wearing rubber boots and they go up to a puddle and they stomp their feet in the puddle and they play in the puddle. That's the way I think of us when we're driving in the rain. We're little kids playing in the puddle.
Absolutely. That I think of it very similarly. It's a good time to be out there, and there's always something to learn. And we come off track, and we're just as jovial whether it was dry or wet. So we're all having a good time racing together, and we're learning together. And you should always go out. So,
and I love that attitude of yours is to learn. That's why we're there. Improve and learn. Yeah.
Yeah. Every session, there's something to learn. So, Every race,
Yeah.
practice, qualifying, there's something to learn. So you did say that I've read everything and I've listened to almost everything. So one of the big things for me was softening up the car. Now, my wife does off-road driving, and what they tell you to do is air down. That is not what you do, or not what you recommend, at least as of a couple of years ago, if I remember correctly. So let's talk about tire pressures.
Okay, so I get to use my favorite phrase.
Mm-hmm.
It depends.
Okay.
And so there are times where less tire pressure is good, and there are times when more tire pressure is good. I'm going to say often, and again, it's going to depend on the type of tire and all sorts of other things, but often if it's like really heavy rain and there is that stream running across the track and there are puddles building up, often more tire pressure helps. And the reason for that is you get sort of a crown on the tire. And, so rather than having a flat surface across the tread,
Mm-hmm.
You get a bit of a bulge in that tire. So in a way, effectively, you've narrowed the width of the tire, and now that tire can slice through the puddle. And I've had times where I've increased the tire pressure dramatically, and I was the only car on track that wasn't hydroplaning, hitting the puddles. Right. And when it was raining really hard and there was lots of water build up on the track. Now, when it's let's say it's more average rain,
mm-hmm.
This is where it gets a little bit tricky because what you're really trying to do is you're trying to get to that ideal optimum hot tire pressure. Now, let's pick a number here. Let's say your optimal hot tire pressure is 30 psi.
Mm-hmm.
When the tires are cold, let's say you would start your tire pressures at 25, and on a dry track, they would raise 5 psi and therefore would be at your hot optimal pressure at 30. If you're starting in the rain, to get to that 30, you might have to start with the tire pressures at 27 because the temperature isn't going to raise in them, so it's not going to increase the pressure so much. So in that case, to get to that optimal pressure where you've got the maximum tread width on the track, because you're not worried about hydroplaning, you're just looking for ultimate grip. To get to 30, you may have to raise your tire pressures to start. So sometimes that's an advantage. There are times when the surface is damp, but you've got heat in the tires where you would want a little bit less pressure because for the same reasons as softening the springs, anti-roll bars, dampers, all of those kinds of things, softening those helps so you're not transferring as much load, which keeps the tires more planted all equally on the track. For the same reason, the tires are a spring. So by softening the tire pressures, lessening the tire pressures, they become a softer spring. Mm-hmm. And that sometimes gives you more grip. So that's why it depends. So I've just gone from, you might want to raise your tire pressures a lot. You might want to raise them just a little bit to get to that ideal hot pressure, or you might want to lower them a little bit to go along with the intent of softening the overall load transfer, springs, everything else. You're softening that to gain more overall grip that way. In some ways, even in the dry, if we soften the springs, if we soften the dampers, if we soften the anti-roll bars, we actually gain more overall grip. The downside is the car becomes sloppy. Mm-hmm. It becomes unresponsive. It becomes, you turn the wheel and it kind of goes, rolls, kind of leans, and then you get your grip. And on the track, the reason we sometimes go stiffer on all those things is to get that responsiveness. So it's more, it transitions quicker. Well, in the rain, you can't transition quicker because there's not enough grip to do that. So that's why we can soften things like the springs and anti-roll bars and dampers and stuff like that. So, it's that's why the saying "it depends" is so popular.
Yeah, it will. It's going to depend on the tire you run. It's going to depend on the track, like we talked about before. It's going to depend on your comfort level. It's going to depend on how much of the weather is coming. And they're all correlated and related, and you have to make your judgment there. You made a good reasoning for doing each one, and you have to take that reasoning into account as you prepare to head out. So, go ahead.
And you touch on something there as well as there are times where, let's say it's a race and it's 20 minutes before your race and it's raining, but you see blue sky over there. That's when it gets really tricky because you could go, okay, let's put the rain setup on the car. Let's soften the car. And it might be good for the first 5 minutes, but then the track dries out and you get your butt kicked for the last 25 minutes of the race or whatever it is if it's a sprint race. Yep. A lot of times, like I'm involved in IMSA coaching and we're doing, 2 hour and 40 minute races, a sprint race, 6 hour races, 10 hour races, 12 hour races, 24 hour races. And, if you're doing a 12-hour race and it's going to rain, but it's doubtful that it's going to rain for 12 hours straight, you pretty much leave the dry setup on the car because it's like, okay, suffer through it, do the best you can while it's raining, but know that it's going to dry. It's going to spend more time being dry than it is wet. And therefore you go that way. Now, if it's it's a 4-hour race and that it's going to rain for the next 3 hours, put the rain setup on and suffer for the last hour as it dries out. So there's all of those kinds of things. And just one other little quick thing on the prep thing is, if you're in a class of car where you run rain tires or slicks, or rain tire and a dry tire, there have been many times where I used to have my car sitting up on stands and one side of the car has got rain tires on it and one side has got dry tires on it. And the reason for that is if I've got to make a change in the last 30 seconds, this way I only have to change 2 tires.
Yep.
So
yeah, that's a good tip.
It can make a difference. Yeah.
Yeah, especially when you're cutting it close, when you're looking where the prevailing winds come from and the sky is either dark or blue, you're making those last minute decisions. That's a good tip. I wanted to comment, you said you had to come in once because you had a visibility issue. I do not understand why people remove a heater core. I understand why you remove it from a production car, but there are tiny, heavy BTU. I think the one in my race car is 11 pounds wet. So when you fill up all the lines and it has a fan and it's like 38,000, 37,000 BTUs or something like that, it clears my windshield no problem. I took out 50 and I put 11 back in. Find 11 pounds somewhere else. I don't understand that. Yeah. But
well, so that visibility piece is, man, that's a huge, huge deal. And that, making sure there's other airflow. Like I've had cars that had, the production heater core still in there and it's struggling. I also know people, you can, go to AutoZone or whatever, and you can buy one of those things that you could put in the rear window. Basically, it's the, the little wires. Right. It's for the rear window defogger kind of a thing. I mean, a lot of guys will actually put one of those on the windshield. Yep. And that's, you have that, you have some air flowing on there. And if you've got the production heater core and all that kind of stuff, I'm a great believer in go overboard on making sure you have visibility. And, if you're I grew up racing open wheel cars and open cockpit cars. Keeping your visor on your helmet from fogging, there's a challenge.
Right.
And very early on, I learned that, if I just put a little rolled up piece of tape in there and just so that it holds my visor from completely closing. And then, of course, in the middle of the race, rainwater got in with a piece of sand, and I got a piece of sand stuck in my eye and drove the last half of the race with one eye practically. So that's not a good one, but, doing everything you possibly can to ensure you have good visibility is just, it's massive. Take the time.
It improves safety, right? So
yeah,
it doesn't matter how well you're doing on track. We always know if you blow a flag, that's it. Doesn't matter where you are, right? And you have to be able to see those corner workers. We talked about awareness earlier. You want to be able to see where you're going. You're going to find new markers, right? When you're out there finding that grip, you're going to find new markers for yourself, and you need to be able to see it. If it's half fogged up, mostly fogged up, you're almost blind out there. So that's my big pet peeve. Yeah. So,
and a couple things out of that. One is, I often say the driver that has the most references wins the race. And part of that, in the rain, sometimes we cannot see our usual references as well. So if you're coming into a heavy braking zone, you're coming into turn 1 at VIR, and you're right behind another car, and there's spray off that other car in front of you, you may not be able to see your brake point that you normally use. So when it is dry, you need to collect other references, secondary references where, I typically brake at the 400 marker. What's on the other side of the track at 400 or just before it or just after it? What else can I see? Is there some other crack in the pavement, or is there something else that I can see? So having alternative, additional references is super important. And the time to get those is not waiting till it's starting to rain. It's actually collect those when it's dry, make note of those when it's dry so that you can use them in the rain. And I'll tell you a story about a driver that I know who was in his very first season of racing, and he was doing an endurance club race, and he's driving the car, and the experienced driver in the team had told a story about how he was in a race and the windshield fogged up, and he was like loosening off his shoulder belts to lean forward to wipe the windshield.
Oh,
so, which is not a good piece of advice, but the guy that I know who was, he was a novice, his first season of racing. He hears this story. So he's on track. His windshield's fogging up because it's pouring rain. What does he do? He loosens his belts.
Yeah.
And then gets to a corner and the windshield just goes, and it's completely, totally blind. Like, I'm seeing the video afterwards, and there is not a way in the world that this driver could have known where to turn the wheel. So he guessed, and he missed off in the grass and into a tire wall. Mm-hmm. And the only good thing about it was he had loosened his belts to try to wipe the windshield, realized that he couldn't quite do it, so he tightened his belts, and it was like 3 seconds later that he crashed.
Oh, wow.
If he had not tightened his belts, he would have been hurt badly. So please do not do that.
No.
You're better off slowing down. You're better off pulling in. You're better off doing just about anything. Do not loosen your belts to wipe the windshield. I know drivers who, in the rain, in endurance races, they have like a little stick or a squeegee with a rag on the end of it where they can reach down and reach up and wipe the windshield. I'm much more in favor of your approach of fix it before you get on track with the right system. Yeah.
So, and here's a story for the folks about the brake markers. You don't need a secondary reference just for the wet weather. You need it for the dry.
Yeah.
My last race,
Yeah.
we got released. We were the first group. We were doing standing start. We go. Lo and behold, group, I don't know, 3 of 4, they had a wild start, and there's no brake marker but the 1 and the 6 left. We come around for lap 2, and I'm like, oh, well, that's cute, you know.
Yeah.
And you could see everyone in my mirrors, everyone's looking for their markers, and it's all the markers on the side that got mowed down, and everyone was guessing. So get them early, get them in the dry. You'll use them in the wet and the dry, I promise.
That's why I say the driver that collects the most reference points wins.
Absolutely. I learned that lesson last race, so.
Well, good. Yeah. Nicely done. Yeah.
All right. So I think that covers everything I wanted to cover about racing in the weather. What do you have? Do you have anything else saved? Do you have any more topics you wanted to cover?
Oh, we could probably go on forever, but the bottom line is learn to enjoy it. That's the biggest thing. And you touched on improving and learning, and what you learn from driving in the rain is going to make you a way, way better driver in the dry as well. Even to the point of, in the rain, you may absolutely need those secondary reference points. In the dry, they're going to help you in a situation where somebody mows down the brake markers, or you're in a pack of cars and your view is blocked. Yep. So, all the things about car control and all that kind of stuff that people have said for years about, why you should drive in the rain applies. And some people say, yeah, but the risk level goes way up. Well, you're in charge of that. You're in charge of that risk level. And, that doesn't mean going out there and crawl around, but the more you drive in the rain, as you mentioned at the very beginning, the more you drive in the rain, the better you get at it. And I don't think that the risk level is any higher in the rain than it is in the dry. If you have the right mindset, you think about using the things that we've talked about here, and you drive proactively rather than reactively.
Yep. I learned that lesson too.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's why I only got half of a race in while it was wet out. So,
and to your point, the car prep, if you think, oh, water won't get there, it will.
Oh yeah, it will. For sure.
Yeah. The number of top level, high, super professional race teams that have had car issues, electrical issues in the rain, it's surprising. So even the best miss that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe they're not the best. They're close to the best. But yeah, do that prep beforehand, and it will make a difference. Yeah.
Mr. Bentley, where can people find you? More about the Speed Secrets, the books that you've authored, all that sort of stuff. How can they get in touch with you?
Speedsecrets.com. That's my home for everything. And almost everything. I've actually just recently launched speedsecrets.ai, which is a really, I think it's very cool. I'm embracing this whole AI thing where it's kind of like it's like Google on steroids, mm-hmm. with the only difference is it only ever accesses content that I've created. Now, I'm not saying I'm the greatest or anything like that, but I've used things like ChatGPT and ask questions, and if it comes back with 5 points, 3 of them are fantastic, 1 of them's okay, and 1 of them is I don't really think that's right. That's inaccurate. Because speedsecrets.ai only pulls from my content. Mm-hmm. Well, at least I believe most of it, not all of it, because I don't believe all of what I've said. But So, and the whole idea of it is you can be at the track and you can think about, hey, I'm getting out, I get out braked every session. What can I do to improve my braking? You can type that into this thing, and it'll come back with an answer. And then based on that, you can ask another question and keep digging. And it's kind of like I'm sitting beside you in the paddock, and you go, I'm getting out braked by everybody. Well, next session, you could do this or you could do this. And that's what this thing does. It's kind of a little bit mind-boggling what it does. And I've tried to fool it myself, and I haven't been able to do it yet. So it's doing a pretty good job of. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So that and speedsecrets.com or speedsecrets.ai. If you're a sim racer, I have simraceracademy.com, and it's all content based around or focused on sim racing. So that's how you can get a hold of me.
Awesome.
Or all the usual social media stuff. So
yeah, that's great. The race car version of Skynet, Ross Bentley is creating it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And actually, how can you get a hold of me? The thing that I like the most is when I'm at a track and somebody just goes, hey, just want to say hi because I've read your stuff or I heard your video or something like that. I love it when somebody comes up and says hello at the track. And there are times when I'm like smack in the middle of coaching somebody and I don't have a ton of time. And I apologize right now if that's the case, but I love meeting fellow track driving junkies at the track. So say hello if I'm there.
I sure will. Thank you, sir, for coming on and joining us and talking about racing in the wet weather.
Come on, say it.
No, I can't do it.
Okay. Well, I loved talking about racing in the rain. Thanks for having me on.
Anytime, sir. Thank you.
Keep learning and having fun.
I will.
Until next time, keep working on yourself, keep working on the car, and let's get faster.